Hey, welcome back to Next Third, Best Third. I'm David Fenwick. I'm the founder and the host, and we're so glad you're here. Today, we're going to be talking about communication. And you know, when we talk about Next Third, Best Third, one of the areas that we're really targeting is relationships. And you may be a man who has little kids, and your relationship and your communication with your wife has changed. Maybe you're trying to figure out how to communicate with teens. Maybe you're at a point where you're in an empty nest and you look across the table at your wife and you don't even know how to talk to each other anymore. That's really common, but it's really important that we learn skills as to how to communicate properly. And to that, I'm here with my new friend, Tyson Morlet. Tyson, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, maybe
Real excited to be here.
Yeah, I am too. Maybe you could just share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm just a guy. I'm just a normal guy trying to live the best life that I possibly can, trying to be a good husband, a good spouse, trying to raise little kids to be better off than I ever was.
Come on.
And, my dad gave me the best start that he could, and I want to give my kids an even better start so that we're like a pendulum slowly swinging closer to center.
Sure, that's so great.
Yeah, and I think the family is, it's how heaven comes to earth. It's how we see true change.
Right.
And so, that's my mission, is just to be the best father that I possibly can.
That's so great. Yeah, before we can see any kind of effective change in society, it has to start within relationship in our family, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it's almost stupid simple that if the family is good, then the community is good. If the community is good, the city is good. If the city is good, the state is good. The world is good. And that's how we effectively bring change.
That's great.
And it doesn't have to be this generation right now. I think that it's wisdom to build something that will affect generations 40 down the road, 30 down the road. And so I'm trying to expand my mind to think about how are my kids going to be better off because I was in their life.
Yeah.
And how are my grandkids going to be better off because my kids were in my life. And that's how I'm thinking,
That's so great. I love that perspective because it can be really daunting when we're trying to fix everything right now and make everything perfect. But it's like measuring out, saying, hey, what difference can I make now that will then be built on later?
Yeah, I think someone told me, and I just took it to heart, the best thing I can do as a father, especially when my kids are young, is to take care of this.
Yeah.
Take care of this heart. And if I can conquest this, uncharted territory, then I'm going to be able to at least teach them how to do that for themselves.
That's right. Yeah. How old are your kids?
My kids, I've got a 5-year-old son who's about to turn 6. I've got an 8-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old daughter.
Oh, wow. That's great. Daddy's girls.
Yeah.
That's a real deal.
Yeah. I love it. It is everything.
Yeah. I've got 5 daughters and 1 son, but they're all 18 and older. So they're, my baby went to college this year. So
I can't wait. I can't wait for that. I'm looking forward to
It's exciting.
That. Yeah.
It's exciting. But, it's interesting because you talk about taking care of this. I've realized that my kids, even at their ages now, adults, they watch what I'm doing personally.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And if I'm healthy, if I'm taking care of this, if I'm investing in me, it really, it gives them comfort,
Yeah, well, I think that's by design. I think that as, and I'm going to use a cuss word here,
that's
as
fine.
The patriarch of your family, I know that's not a popular phrase today, and maybe we'll have time to unpack a little bit of how and why that is and how maybe we can reclaim it. But as the patriarch of your family, you are the first one in your generation to reach this age.
Right.
And so your kids naturally, by design, are going to look at how you do it, and they're either going to accept philosophies, reject philosophies, overcorrect, undercorrect, and hopefully get it a little bit better than you did.
Yeah.
But how old are you now?
65.
65, spring chicken.
Yeah, come on.
Your daughters have never been that age.
Right.
You're the first to be that age in your nuclear family.
That's right.
So they have to look to you to see how you're doing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important when we started this mission of Next Third, Best Third, was really to be in a position of self-examination, honest appraisal, and then living with intentionality. So because it is important at every stage of your life.
Absolutely.
If nothing else, which is still the high priority, your kids are watching.
Oh, yeah.
How are you navigating 65? How are you navigating, how old are you?
I'm 41.
41, right? So
the
how
little
are we? Yeah, how are we navigating this?
Yeah.
And we're setting a standard. We're setting a bar, and really, I think what we're doing is we're laying out a foundation for legacy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, we look at now I have some thoughts about this, but we don't live under the Mosaic covenant. We're not under the law.
Right.
But those 10 commandments are there for a purpose. And I would argue that this ancient document lists these 10 laws as a means to protect and establish the nuclear family.
Yeah.
And smack dab in the middle, number 5, right, is honor your father and mother. And we can think that means listen to everything they say, obey everything they say, blindly trust and accept. But true honor is to look with a critical spirit, but without judgment.
Wow, that's good.
And either course correct or accept.
Yeah.
And that's how we honor. I honor my father's legacy by doing the things that he failed in a little bit better.
That is so good.
I honor my father's legacy by grabbing the things that he did well and accepting those strengths. And I think that a temptation that we all fall into is the temptation of rejecting our parents because they're fallen.
Yeah.
And they're imperfect. So let's just reject them, throw them out, and try and go our own way. But then we are feeling around in the dark. And what I finally realized is what I had to do is I had to accept my parents for who they are. Failures, flaws, foibles. And I had to then access their strengths. And you can't access their strength while rejecting their weakness.
Wow, that is so good.
You have to accept both. And so, my dad and I are talking through this right now. He's about your age, 66. Yeah. And, he is looking back at his life and going, man, I really blew it on these things. And I'm saying, but Dad, now I don't have to make those same mistakes.
Yeah.
Now I can learn from those mistakes. And so they actually become strength for our lineage.
That's so good.
And so, man, that's what I'm wrestling through. Honoring my father is learning from what he did, learning from the mistakes he made.
That's right.
Yeah.
We have a phrase we use here a lot, and it's your past failures, your past struggles, your brokenness. All that does not disqualify you, but rather it uniquely qualifies you.
Sure.
And what you're really saying right there is you're looking at your parents, you're looking at your father in particular, and you're saying, hey, those failings and those failures are teaching me.
Right.
I'm learning from them.
Right.
Which is redemption.
Oh, yeah.
You're redeeming
100%.
all that, right?
And I'm looking at my son, and I'm looking at him and saying, what a blessing it would be if you could get farther than I was able to.
Yeah, come on.
Even if it's in his own heart,
Yeah.
What a blessing. And I need to start honoring my father for the starting point he gave me, that I might be able to give my son an even further starting point.
Yeah.
And my daughters, of course.
I'm working on my second audiobook, and it's titled Legacy. The subtitle's not there yet, but it's really exactly that. Is legacy is something. It's not what you leave behind, right? It's who, but it's building upon the who, right? It's building upon the past, building upon and getting. There's a foundation laid, and that foundation, like you say, some of it might have to be cleared off.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you clear it off in that foundation, you build upon that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, you got to accept the whole.
That's right.
You got to accept the whole foundation, though.
That's exactly.
And I
right.
think, honestly, my father's mistakes inform my future potential addictions. And that is so important for me to understand. It's not in shunning his mistakes that I can move forward. It's in understanding them and embracing them and then learning how to conquer them because I'm ready for them.
Yeah.
I think this was one of the mistakes in the garden, in the ancient document, is that Eve had this lie in her head that she wasn't even supposed to touch this fruit nor even look at it. When that's never what God said.
No.
God said, don't eat of it. You can understand it. You can study it. You can try and figure out why this commandment was given. And I think that's a mistake we make, is we shun the whole thing. We want to stay away from the tree. We want to put caution tape around it and religion around it and rules around it, and we never understand it.
Right.
When I would rather look at my father's addiction and be informed by it. So that's
good.
my perspective.
That's
I know
so
it has
good.
nothing to do with marital communication.
No, but this is where it
does.
starts.
Yeah,
it does, right? And that's the thing I love about this is you started with yourself because it has to start there.
Absolutely.
And communication does start from our past.
Oh yeah.
You know.
We don't understand that when you get married, You're two people who have learned independence, jammed into a 750 square foot apartment together, trying to learn this interdependence thing without becoming codependent.
Right.
And you're really just two children wrestling out your childhood trauma without even realizing it.
That's right. You're bringing
so
in your
many-
own trauma. And
Yeah, so many of your fights are not even about, the dishes or sex or finances. It's actually about security from when you felt a need when you were young that was never fulfilled.
That's right.
And so we're bringing in these, it is like handling a hand grenade, and when you've never even thought through how explosive this thing could be, marriage.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cool. That's so good.
So cool. It sucks. It's
It
terrible.
does. Well, that's a better word. It does. But the cool thing is that you're recognizing it, right? And
Right.
you're bringing
And
this
I'm trying
life.
to help other people's recognize it too.
Well, that's it with, our listeners range in age from in their 30s, on up into 70s and 80s even. And, at these different stages of your life, it's interesting because I shared this with you. I used to brag that my wife and I never had a fight, right? We never had any conflict.
Right.
And then 6 years ago, after 28 years, when she just walked away, and I was like going, oh man, all of a sudden it came to light over the next course of the next year, is going through inner healing and all this. I realized what an idiot I was, because we did have conflict. We just didn't deal with it. We didn't communicate, right?
And we're tricked into thinking that is the easier route.
Yeah.
But man, from your perspective, is it easier?
Oh no.
No.
It was horrible.
It's horrible.
It was
It
horrible.
is the
It was
most
devastating.
difficult thing.
Yeah, it was devastating. And what it really was an avoidance of pain, an avoidance of rejection. I grew up with some sense of rejection and unworthiness, and so I didn't want that. So
Right.
what do? You just don't have conflict.
Right.
And yet conflict is in every relationship we have.
Yeah. Conflict actually might be the glue
Yeah.
that pulls us together.
Yeah, and this leads us to what you and your wife do. You were telling me before when we met a few weeks ago about how you gather together couples,
Yeah.
right? Tell us a little bit about that and what you do there.
Yeah. So, for us, it really all does start in the ancient document,
Yeah.
in the book of Genesis. Exactly what you're talking about, man. You have these two independent individuals, one made from the ground, one made from the flesh, one able to conquer the terrain, one able to conquer the human heart and the soul, and they're jammed together. And then they fall. They make a mistake. And you see right in the beginning exactly what you're talking about, is that Adam stands passively by while Eve is deceived by the serpent. Allegory, historical narrative, I have no clue, and I don't honestly care, because there's still a snake that's after this relationship.
Right.
And it is more easy for us to drift apart than to come together.
That's right.
And so I'm trying to figure out, why is that? Why did Adam stand passively by? And why do I today stand passively by? And exactly what you're saying, man. I would rather avoid a conflict.
Yeah.
I would rather even avoid clearing up what might be a false narrative, because I'm busy on my phone thinking around or watching, some stupid TV show.
Right.
When actually that night could be way better used fighting with my spouse about this and getting it right and trying to course correct.
That's right. Digging in there, right?
Yeah. And then of course my wife, she just wants to fix me. She wants me to be the future man, the future leader. I've got the potential. I'm the chosen son that will save us all, and man, these two ships can pass in the night, man.
Right.
And that's probably what you experienced a little bit.
Oh, no question. And then when it came to fruition, right, and the realization hit, it was like this aha moment. That's not right. It was much deeper than that. But this realization came to where I was like going, what an idiot,
Yeah.
What an idiot I've been, that we should have been intentional and, about digging in. I have a friend, he and his wife have an amazing skill set as far as communication. And what they do is every January at the new year, and they've been doing this, their kids are now adults. So they've been doing this for 20 plus years. They would get together and they would take 3 days, and they'd have someone watch the kids, and they'd have 3 days where they would go and they would plan and dream for the year. And then every week they would take an hour and a half, usually on a Tuesday, and they would do the business of communicating about their week. How's things going?
I love that.
And their marriage is unbelievable.
Right.
Because they do the hard work, but it's not hard to them anymore.
Right.
It's just
Becomes a muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's their nature now.
Right.
So,
I mean, I heard this said, and I think it's so powerful. You can't learn to sail a ship in a storm.
wow.
And that's what we do with conflict. You know, we try and figure it out as our adrenaline's pumping, as the cortisol is rushing, as the blood is in the back of our head. We go straight to lizard brain, emergency, fight or flight.
Right.
And then we're like, okay, let's learn how to conflict. That's not how you do it.
No.
You actually have to learn outside of the storm.
Right.
You have to learn all the parts and components of the human heart and human soul, how to control your cortisol, how to control your adrenaline, and then you enter into conflict.
They have what they call ground rules of conflict, right? And those
Yeah.
ground rules, I'm sure it doesn't always go as smooth as depending on the topic. But one of the things is their ground rule is that we're not going to raise our voices, we're not going to lose our tempers.
I would love for my wife to employ both of those.
Yeah,
She will not.
she will not. So that's okay, But anyways, and I'm not sure they do all the time.
Yeah.
It always sounds good when you're telling your story, but when you're living it, it's a little different.
I mean, it's complex, right? Because even that, you take that rule on its face value. For my wife, her child trauma is not being heard as a child. She was hurt by someone who was supposed to love and protect her. So she has to be loud to be heard.
Yeah.
That's her child trauma. And for whatever reason, God has given us 100 years on planet Earth to figure that out.
Yeah.
Marriage is a 60-year commitment, right? Until death do we part. Why? Because that's freaking how long it takes to figure this stuff out.
That's right.
So I'm expecting around age 99, maybe she's not going to yell as much in conflict because she knows that she can be heard.
Yeah.
Now, my trauma, I had a caregiver who all they did was yell and scream and throw things. And, so my trauma is like, don't yell at me.
Yeah, you pull back.
Because I'm scared if you do. And then I have to pretend to be strong.
Right.
And I have to, and then but luckily the marriage commitment is 60 years.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping around, I'm going to beat my wife, 97. I'll be comfortable with her yelling at me right as she's tapering off, So that's I mean, I think that's a beautiful example of, we're not fighting each other.
No.
I'm fighting the ways that I didn't feel protected as a child.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, as whatever author is out there has brought us together, he's almost positioned us perfectly to deal with those traumas.
Yeah.
And he's given us 60 years to do so.
Yeah.
We think so much. I mean, I mean newlyweds who think they get married and they're a good spouse, they're a good wife, they're a good husband. No, dude, you learn that in the fire of 40 years. That's how you learn how to be a good spouse.
That's right.
And so we try and rush it. Well, we shouldn't have a fight. We shouldn't need help. We shouldn't ask for help. We shouldn't air our dirty, laundry, whatever. When the reality is you learn this through the trial. Mm-hmm. You learn this, and hopefully you have a community around you that will hold you together as you're figuring it out.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's systems. Marriage is math for me.
Okay.
I'm a logical guy. My wife is the exact opposite. She's almost all feeling. So again, we're perfectly positioned to challenge each other. And we have a lot of conflict. I'm not going to come out here and pretend like my wife's an 8 on the Enneagram. She's a challenger. She got hurt by someone she loved when she was a kid. So she's never going to be hurt again, right. and I will do almost anything to avoid conflict to make sure that feminine spirit stays tamed, and so I'll lie, I'll manipulate, I'll hide, I'll pretend just to make sure that, and so we're perfectly positioned to have explosive conflict. And so I learned early on, man, I need some systems that are going to help me navigate this thing, or we are going to blow up. It's not going to work.
So let's dig into systems.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what those systems are.
One of the first things, I can't even claim it as my own. And this is from John Piper. It's called the Compost Pile.
The compost pile?
The Compost Pile.
Okay.
And the analogy goes like this. If I were to take some dirty old trash, coffee grounds, banana peels, orange peels, molding, rotting cheese, and I were to put it right here in the middle of this studio right now,
right,
and it had been there for weeks, months, would we want to have a podcast here? No, it'd be stinking, it'd be gross, the room would be, filled with mold, and we'd be sick after, right?
Right.
And so, but if you take that same stuff and you put it in a compost bin on the corner of your yard, and you sift through it every couple months, and you turn it around every couple months, then after some time, what does it become? It becomes nurturing for your garden.
That's right.
That you can now grow and feed your whole family
Something
from. It
you
becomes
value.
sustenance. It
Right.
becomes life.
Right.
And so
It becomes life-giving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so this is what the compost pile is. It's these fights. Listen, my wife and I are going to fight about the trauma that she received as a child. We're going to fight about that for 60 years. We're going to fight about my pornography addiction. We're going to fight about that for 60 years. The hiding, the manipulating, we're going to fight about that for a super long time. But if we keep it in our living room, it's going to make the whole house sick.
That's right.
It cannot be every day. It cannot be every moment. It can't be side comments over the dinner table. It can't be, shots in the car. It has to be in its rightful place. And so my wife and I, we've even learned, you can kind of feel it coming on. It's been about 3 months since we've had one of these compost pile issues, and you can kind of feel it. And then it's like, all right, give the kids a melatonin. Friday night's fight night. We got to do this. Let's get the kids over at Mimi's house.
Yeah.
We got to have this conflict. You can kind of, the side comments are starting to get fired. And so you're just like, all right, it's time. Let's dig into this. And then and those fights sometimes are explosive, and we're not doing the right things. And she is yelling a little bit, and
Sure.
I am hiding and manipulating and trying to, and we're just working through it. But man, we get a little closer to the center of the issue every one of those fights. And then when the fight's over, you put it down. Friday night's fight night. That means Saturday morning is cuddle time.
That's great.
It's bring donuts home for the kids and chill out, because we did that. We made as much progress as we could.
Yeah.
And now we're going to put it down until the next season.
See, I love that. One of our key words that we use here is intentionality.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. You're talking about having intentionality to put the compost where it belongs.
Right.
And also intentionality to go dig in the compost when you have to.
Yeah. And I think it's a temptation of church people, to be like, oh, we don't have that. Oh, there's nothing gross in the back. Oh, there's nothing hidden in the closet.
Yeah.
No skeletons buried anywhere.
How you doing, brother? I'm blessed. I'm
Yeah,
overcoming.
dude. And if only Chick-fil-A was open on Sunday, it'd be perfect. No, it's like, dude, we are all fallen, broken people dealing with a generational curse that has been passed on to us from our great-great-great-great-granddaddy.
Yeah.
And the sooner we realize that, the sooner we can, with intentionality, tackle the root of the problem.
That's right.
Understanding it's a 60-year journey. Life is 100 years. If we could figure it out in a church service, life would be an hour and a half. We'd have the life cycle of a fly, one day. But no, dude, this thing takes 100 years, man. If marriage was supposed to accomplish what it accomplished in 4 years, that's how long it would be. Instead, it's a lifetime. Why? Because that's how long it takes.
I love your perspective, because, a big part of Next Third, Best Third is challenging guys your dad's age, my age, right? These guys who are in their 50s, going in their 60s, and even later, to realize that it's not over. You're not done. It's not time to rest on your laurels. It's like, let's step it up. We still got work to do.
Yeah.
Let's be intentional. Let's dream. Let's get dirty.
Yeah.
Let's have a purpose.
You ever heard the Stages of a Man?
No.
It's really cool. It's like you're, let's see if I can try and not jack this up here. But you start out as a mentee, and then you become a master in a craft, and then you're a warrior just scrapping for what's yours, and then you transition into king, where you lead over and reign over what you've built, and then you transition to sage, where you're passing it on to the next generation.
Right. That's so good.
And I think, man, we get stuck in different parts. I get stuck in warrior, like, no, this is my time. And it's like, no, dude, you're supposed to be moved on. Yeah. And so for my dad, I'm encouraging him right now.
That's so good.
Like, you can stop being scrappy. You can actually go into the sage with whatever wisdom you've accumulated in 66. It's time for king or it's time for sage, and you got to figure that out.
That's so good.
Anecdotal.
No, it's important, because, one of the things we wrestle with as we get older is regret.
Yeah.
And sometimes that regret is what I haven't done, but sometimes that regret is kind of a longing, wishing I was back to where I was, and not, and not being comfortable with my new season, my new place. I've been a king, I've built, and I've been this king. I went warrior and king, but now it's time for me to be that sage.
Yeah.
And to recognize the great value in that, to impart wisdom, to impart lessons learned, to be there and say, hey, you're going to get through this.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think I think regret can decay and it will take everything that is good with it.
Yeah.
And if we let regret fester, then we have nothing good to pass on.
That's right.
And so, yeah, regret is one of those things you just got to start. I mean, this is why I'm encouraging my own dad, don't live through the past.
Right.
Live for the future.
That's
and
right.
what can you take from the past to inform that future?
That's right.
And the lessons of loss, dude, I need to learn those more now than ever, But if you're afraid to talk about them, if you're afraid to talk about the things you regret, then there's no way to prepare the next generation to avoid them.
Yeah.
They just become generational curses, pitfalls that we must fall into.
Right. Well, this is where communication skills, some of the things that you're teaching,
Right.
They're not just for marriage, right? It's being able to, how can I communicate this with you and me communicating, or you and a peer, right?
Yeah.
Because so often men either have learned poor communication skills or none at all.
None at all.
And they're there and they're sitting there and they're 48 years old and their kids are now in the high school, or they're 50 and their kids are in high school, and they have no way to communicate with their kids. They have no skill set there. He and his spouse have no skill set.
This goes into the great pandemic we find ourselves in, is that fathers don't even know how to interface with their sons.
Yeah.
And so how is a son supposed to learn how to interface with other males? And then how is he supposed to have a son and learn how to, it's a snowball that just keeps getting worse.
That's right.
Obviously, you can't solve every marital conflict, through a quarterly compost pile, right? So we actually have another system that I'd love to tell you about.
That's
and
what I
it's
want.
Very similar to what you were talking about earlier.
Okay.
We call it sanctuary. So sanctuary, and again, this is where I'm going back to marriage is math. Like Jordan Peterson says, you need 1 hour a week to make a relationship work. I want to say that's awesome and I love it. I think you need 2 hours.
Okay.
2 hours a week. 2 intentional, phone down, TV off, no Netflix hours. And this, one of them, 1 hour is to love. You got to go on a date. You got to find that space. I got young kids. It's so hard. Sometimes a date is literally Tuesday at 11 a.m., but that's got to happen every single week. The other one, just for the math, is what we call sanctuary. And it's an hour to conflict. It's an hour to fight. And it's an intentional, set apart hour that is made sanctimonious, is made set apart for the purpose of conflict. And this, again, we're not going to touch the abuse very much here, or may inform the compost pile later. We're not going to touch the pornography addiction every single time, but that'll inform, the compost pile later. But how it works is this: I do it in a public place because my wife is a yeller, so we go somewhere.
You're smart.
Yeah. We go to the same place every single week at the same time. We have the same waiter. That waiter knows, dude, it's so awesome. He knows. He comes, he drops our food off. He already knows our order. He drops our coffee off. He doesn't bug us because he knows what we're there to do. Somehow he's figured it out over the time. And depending on how much she yells, that's how high the tip gets, And so, man, we literally go, what's on your list? And it's so interesting. When conflict is in an intentional space, you'll find that only the things that matter make it to that space.
Really?
Yeah. So the things we nitpick each other about all week, how often do those make it to the sanctuary list? Not often.
Right.
And so you realize, man, I didn't need to be taking side shots Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Right.
Because I know I have Thursday coming. That's when we do our sanctuary. I know that that's coming. And so, man, the only things that matter really make it. Now, I don't keep a list. I take the ancient documents seriously when it says love keeps no record of wrongs. My wife, on the other hand, she sees some ambiguity in that text. And so she brings a physical list and we go through it, man. We try and come armored down. We try and come understanding my spouse is not my enemy. We have an enemy and we need to join together to conquer that enemy. And the first place we need to conquer is right here, Right. And so we come to that space armored down as much as we can, defensiveness at the door. We take turns sharing our grievances. We work through them as best as we can. And what I love about it, similar to the compost pile, is when I sign that check and I put that check down on the table, conflict is done.
That's so great.
That's it. We get that time and that time alone.
That's so good.
Now, we'll still pick fights throughout the week, but we know like this intentional space is here for that. And we can even turn to each other on a Monday and go, dude, Thursday's coming. Let's wait till sanctuary for this. And that gives us, the way that I've discovered this probably similar to the couple you were talking about, is like when you don't deal with your conflict, it bleeds into every moment of every day.
You're right.
And when it bleeds into every moment of every day, you don't enjoy being around your spouse, let alone being with your own thoughts, because you realize you're part of that. And so, man, it would be on date night, it'd be like, okay, well, it's the only time we're alone, so let's fight now. Well, I don't want that. I want that hour to love. Mm-hmm. And so, I just, aha moment dawned on me. I need a space for this. I need it on the calendar.
I could see where it would even bleed, not between you and your spouse, but bleed into other areas of your life. Like you bring it into other relationships. You bring it into your workspace, right? Things like
toxic conflict, it does make you the worst version of yourself.
Right. Because we all know what it's like, maybe for ourselves, but definitely for someone else. Let's talk about someone else, who's complaining about their spouse all the time.
Hate being around that.
I know, right? And hopefully that we're not that way, but that person who's because they're not resolving it, right? They don't have a safe spot. They don't have a sanctuary to really work as, our system.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So I think it really is. It is that stupid simple. That's the math. 1 hour to love, 1 hour to fight. I think the guy, personally, I'm old school, I guess. I think the guy should take the lead on this.
Sure.
The woman will always accept, an intentional space to talk.
Right.
So it needs to be the guy who's like, you know what? I see a purpose for this. I've got a vision for this. I could see what it could become. No, it's not easy. No, it's not going to be fun. And guys are terrified to open up this hour with their spouse. They're terrified of it.
Right.
I got people on my own team that are even like, dude, we love everything we're doing with Wed Into War. We don't want to do that, and we're encouraging them and watching the fruit, man. But like anything else, you get that intentional time on the calendar. It's like going to the gym for the first time, man. You go do some squats when you haven't worked out for 10 years, and I guarantee you're not going to be able to walk for a week.
Right.
But if you consistently do that every single week, all of a sudden you're going to become strong.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with conflict. You don't learn to sail a ship in a storm. So put that thing where it needs to be, like it's a gym routine, and you make sure that you're disciplined to do it, and you're going to get better at conflict.
That's so good.
And so, the first one, your wife and you and your wife might not talk for a week. And the second one, you might not talk for 3 days. The third one's going to feel like a date. The fourth one's going to feel like a date. The fifth one's going to be, okay, we're kind of back into some of this nasty stuff. Mm-hmm. The sixth one's going to feel, and then all of a sudden you're just, man, this is my routine now.
This is what we look forward to.
This is what we're working through this.
This is life for us.
And my heart's changing. Your heart's changing. Right. We're bonded in shared suffering. We're bonded in shared growth.
Right.
And so, man, Sanctuary, I'll say this into the camera that I forgot was even there. Yeah. Sanctuary saved our marriage. And not only that, we've watched it save countless other marriages, man, just that intentional space to fight. That's
so great. So you got Compost Pile, you got Sanctuary, anything else that's there? Or
Yeah, we had talked about this a little bit. So, it's pretty hard to leave your fights 1 hour a week. I understand that, especially like during the summer when your kids are just all upon you at all moments, And so my wife and I have learned to intentionally have conflict around our kids.
Yeah. When you told me that a few weeks ago, it blew my mind. And here I'm at this point in my life. I've raised 6 kids. I've got 3 grandkids. And this idea that you introduced a couple of weeks ago to me, I've been thinking about it for weeks now. Yeah. So go into that. That's so
well,
powerful.
It's so interesting. Like, especially if you have multiple kids, like they're no stranger to conflict.
Right.
They are fighting constantly. They are territorial. And they're tribal, and they'll double up on the other one, sure. And they're it's like freaking Survivor out there sometimes, That's an old show from the early 2000s, just in case you're a newer. But man, so they're no stranger to conflict. So it's not weird for them when you tell them, they're like, "What's going on?" And you're like, "We're fighting." They're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we do that all the time." Like they understand that,
right?
And so, another aha for me is like, I never learned how to conflict.
No, I didn't.
Like my parents' conflict it wasn't healthy. I'm not going to, I want to honor their legacy here, but, I didn't learn it from them. And I didn't learn it in my interactions with them, And so I didn't treat my brother and sister. I was the oldest. I didn't treat them well. I didn't know how to conflict with them. I caused a lot of pain and trauma myself,
sure.
Because I never learned this. And so my wife and I, as we got better at conflicting and watched our bodies changing, our hearts changing, we decided if they're not going to learn it from us, they're not going to learn it. They're going to have to go feeling in the dark like we had to,
Sure.
And so we choose carefully, but when we're kind of nagging at each other or getting at each other, and sanctuary's 6 days away, and we don't have time to make it there, we just give each other a look like, all right, let's have this conflict in earshot of the kids or even around the kids. And we're respectful to each other. We use all the tools that we've gleaned from all the sanctuaries and all the compost pile fights and therapy, which we'll talk more about later. And we actually let the kids see us conflict, because I want them to learn how to conflict with each other, and one day conflict with their spouse, and one day conflict with their kids.
Right.
And so it's just built into, and this has it can't get toxic. You can't fight about sex with your kids in the room. Right. You can't fight about, not being able to pay the bills with your kids in the room, because again, that affects their security and starts to give them trauma they have to work through. Right. So we're choosing intentional things. Dad said this, it hurt mom's feelings. Dad shouldn't have said that. Or dad should have said that because mom needed to hear it. Let's work through this, And so they're watching, and my 11-year-old, dude, she picks up every single thing that's going on in the house. She gets it. She gets
Firstborn in particular is all over that.
So she's, and we're in that phase right now where we have friends around us whose marriages are falling apart, with similar aged kids. And so they're afraid, are you guys going to get divorced? Are you guys going to leave each other? This is constantly on their mind now. But they've watched us conflict, and they've watched us make resolution and come back together. Yeah. And so, dude, they are I can see my kids feel security in our relationship.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Because I remember, as you were alluding to your childhood, my parents, my mother was pretty passive. My father was a hardworking guy, 2 jobs. He had his own business. He was a very good man. But end of the day, exhausted, he would just fire off, fire off. It's just bam and yell real quick. He wasn't abusive, but he'd just fire off. And so, I learned from my mom, what you do there is you just pull back, right? Yeah. You just pull back.
Just cocoon up, yeah.
But going back to how we first started this conversation about your dad and about embracing the fullness of your dad, right? His strengths and his weaknesses.
Absolutely.
What you're doing with your kids by doing this is you're initiating them to embrace the weaknesses and the strengths.
And I'm inviting them to watch those weaknesses turn into strengths.
Right. For them too.
Yeah,
for you, but for them too, right? And so to me, this is so powerful, because I know, like my own kids, as I said, they're adults, and we have some great conversations now, some real raw and real ones. And I realize where I didn't teach them the things that you're teaching your kids. So, kudos to you guys. I'm just so proud of you, because
I'm sure we're going to jack them up in other ways.
Oh, well,
and we'll have to circle back and make restitution.
But what a great tool, especially for those of you who are listening who still have kids in the house, But I'm thinking too that skill, there's a way to make that happen even with my adult kids.
Oh, yeah.
Even now.
Absolutely.
It's not too late.
Right.
So for those of us who are empty nesters, we can still make this thing happen. It's just got to be real intentional.
Yeah. And I can't wait to watch you figure that out.
Yeah.
So that you figure it out for me.
That's right.
I do want to just normalize therapy. I don't know how much time we got here, but man, I cannot tell you. I think that dudes specifically think that seeing a counselor, seeing a therapist is weakness.
Right.
But I promise you, it's actually the opposite. It's actually refusing to give up. It's actually saying, even if this takes all the help I can get, I refuse to give up.
Yeah.
And so therapy is normalized in our household. We have multiple therapists that we go to when shit hits the fan and we can't figure it out and it's too much and it's my trauma butting up against her trauma and we can't see things clearly and our confirmation bias has built a false narrative, then we need to get a professional who understands trauma and can see what we can't see to come in and, like a surgeon, delicately get us communicating again. Yeah.
That's so good.
And it's just normalized, man. I have a therapist. I take the reins on this. Do I like therapy? No, I don't like therapy. Nobody likes airing their crap out for some stranger. Nobody likes that.
That's right.
But I'm telling you, it's strength, not weakness. I did come to a point where I'm like, either I get help or this thing fails.
Right.
And I refuse to let it fail, so I need help.
See, that's true masculinity. See, we've talked about this in earlier episodes, not with you, but with others, and it's part of what my message is in Next Third, Best Third is true masculinity isn't being this isolated guy
Right.
who's bucking up and toughening up, but it's being vulnerable, it's being transparent, and it's saying, I am going to fight for this, right? Whatever it takes. If therapy is it, therapy's it, right? But I'm man enough and I'm masculine enough to be the leader in this, which I love that because you're saying, hey, this is so important to me.
Yeah.
I'm willing to expose.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who looks at their physical health and says, I got this, I don't need a doctor, you would call that a fool.
That's right.
Why is your mental health any different?
That's right.
Let's get somebody who's studied the brain and studied family trauma for 20, 30 years. Let's see what they got to say.
That's right.
Let's get a second opinion if necessary.
I was when my wife left, I went through obviously great grief, and I had a friend of mine. He's he's a trauma and a grief counselor kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
He's a chaplain, does that kind of stuff. So he trains first responders and things like that. But he would call me up. He says, "How you doing?" I says, "Man, I'm so pissed off." He says, "Good." I'd be like, "Good." And another time he'd call me up and say, "How you doing?" I says, "I'm so depressed." He'd be like, "Good." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" One day he was doing this, and one day I asked him, I says, "What are you doing?" He says, "David," he goes, "You're going through grief." He goes, "If you weren't experiencing this, I'd be worried." Right? Mm-hmm. And because of that, I decided to go to a grief counselor. And that grief counselor helped me process and sort the laundry. Right? That's what I kind of called it, sorting the laundry, because everything gets enmeshed, everything gets muddy, and all of a sudden I started putting things in the right order, and I was able to deal with things, and I healed. You're always healing, but I mean, I escalated my healing, right, so much faster because of counseling.
Yeah, I just can't speak highly enough about it.
Yeah,
I think especially for a marriage, and quickly, when you're in a conflict, your body is going into a trauma response.
That's right.
It's not in your control.
That's right.
This is all humans. And so, I'm watching my body change, man. You can feel it. The next time you get into it with somebody, even road rage, like you can track this. You will feel the blood leave your fingertips and your toes, and you'll feel it. If you can pay attention, you'll feel it rush to the back of your head.
Yeah.
And the back of your head right here will get tight and it'll get hot. And what your brain is doing is it's saying, this is an emergency. We need to get the hell out of here, or we need to buck up and fight or flight. And you go into full lizard brain. That's what flipping your lid means.
Yeah.
It's when your brain is now in fight or flight. It's an emergency mode. And I realized this early in marriage. I'm a 26-year-old guy trying to figure this thing out with my 20-something-year-old wife. And I'm like, why am I so like pumped up with adrenaline right now? And it took me a while to realize, like, she's not my enemy.
Right.
This is not an emergency. I don't need this. And so I learned to do what the Navy SEALs do, which I think they're human too, but they're in much more difficult situations. Well, you haven't met my wife, but they're in some difficult situations. And so I learned to do what they do. They flex their calves back and forth.
Really?
And what you're doing is you're telling your brain, I don't need the blood up here. Let's get it back down here. Let's get it back down to the legs. So and my wife will even call me out right now. She's like, "You're flexing your calves right now." I'm like, "It's better than flexing my biceps, woman." And I'll watch her. Yeah, you're flexing too. She's like, "Yeah, I am." And we're telling our fight or flight response, we don't need you right now. We actually need rational brain. We actually need to work through this. We actually need to be filled with divine thoughts and trying to work our way through this trauma that our parents couldn't even get through. So we need help.
Sure.
And we're pushing that blood back down there. I think another thing that we do is we take breaks. For some reason, it's like completely normalized. You don't walk away from a fight. What? If you don't walk away, you're doing the worst possible, you're your worst possible self in the moment where we need your best possible self. Take a break.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying you go get in the car, and take off without saying anything. I'll literally look at my wife and say, I just need 5 minutes. Can I get 5 minutes to re-regulate?
That's good.
And self-soothe and practice all the things. And I'll go in the other room and I'll box breathe.
Yeah.
Breathe in 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Expel it as quickly as possible. Wait 4 seconds. And I'll repeat that. What you're doing, I'm telling my lungs, This is where the blood is needed. It's
Yeah.
not needed back here. And I get
it's-
out of that fight or flight response.
What's cool about that is it's really honoring. It's honoring your wife. It's honoring yourself. It's honoring your marriage.
It's honoring the human body that we're
right.
put in. This is how bodies work.
That's right.
This is how this machine works. It's just a soul sack. It's carrying around my soul. You know, I need to learn how to be its master. It's not my master.
No.
It doesn't just get to dictate how I respond to my wife and kids because I'm pissed off. That's not how this works.
Right.
I've got to master this thing.
That's right.
Just like the human heart. I got to master the hardware.
That's good.
You know, and so, man, take a break. Dude, there is no problem. You got to come back together again. We don't want to be like two ships in a night just ignoring conflict.
No, and you don't want to run. That's not what you're doing. What you're doing is you're just taking a break. That's a simple.
5 minutes. I start with 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Box breathe for 5 minutes. I promise you box breathe for 5 minutes,
Yeah.
the adrenaline is going to be gone. The cortisol is going to be gone. You got to realize these chemicals are pumped into your brain
Right.
so that you survive, but you don't need them in that moment.
No, you don't need a fight or flight with your wife.
Most people don't. Some people might.
Some maybe so.
Yeah. So, man, we employ those tactics. I use those during sanctuary. I use those definitely during the compost pile fights, man. And I want to normalize. We have knockout, we have yelling, threatening to leave fights. 15 years married. We run we wrote the book. I just want to normalize, dude, conflict. I mean, I'm thinking about conflict even as this. What if conflict is the means of grace that actually God enacts sanctification?
Right.
And we're avoiding it like it's bad. Obviously, if conflict was bad, Jesus wouldn't have gone to the cross, which is the apex, the archetype of conflict.
It's interesting. On the way over here, I was thinking about a promise that Jesus made that nobody ever embroiders and puts and hangs on their wall. And it's this one. It says, "In this world, you're going to have trouble."
Yeah.
Nobody's claiming that promise, right? But
the second part, but fear not. Yeah, I love that part.
Yeah, fear not, I've overcome
Yeah.
it. But the reality is what he's doing is he's normalizing trouble. You're going to have problems. You're going to have conflict. You're going to have issues. We're all going to have it.
Life
right?
is suffering. If it wasn't, Jesus would not have gone to a cross.
That's right. That's right. And so once we can normalize, and I think that's a big part of when we're talking about communication is and this is where you started the whole conversation with your dad and bringing it, is normalizing and accepting the fullness of who you are, the fullness of the experience, right?
Yeah.
Hey, in this experience that I call my life, I'm going to have ups and downs, highs and lows. I'm going to have failures. I'm going to have victories. I'm going to have sin. I'm going to have joy. I'm going to have it all. I'm going to knock it out of the park at times.
Yep.
And other times, I'm sent to the minors. I suck. I'm no good anymore. But you have to normalize that to be able to look at it with honest appraisal.
Absolutely.
So
I love that.
yeah, this is so
Super
good.
important.
This is so good. Do you have any parting? We've been here for a while. Do you have anything that you want to share that you haven't shared yet? I don't want to rush it.
Yeah, I mean, I think embracing failure is the only way you can overcome it. I had to embrace, yes, I'm a person who fights with my wife. I'm not what you were at 40, what you thought you were.
Right.
I had to let, when I was in seminary, I had a Bible teacher who said he never had a fight with his wife. And so I took that as the golden rule. That's going to be me. 2 weeks into marriage, I'm like, what? This is not what I signed up for.
Right.
And it's taken me, 10 something years to figure out, no, the conflict is the beauty.
Yeah.
The conflict, the fight is the beauty. And this archetypal Messiah figure, Jesus, that we look to, he died in conflict with his bride. Mm-hmm. He allowed his bride to crucify him. And that is the archetype of love. We all look at that as the greatest symbol of love ever shown to humankind.
Yeah.
And yet we reject it in our own lives.
Right. That's so good.
And that's why Jesus says, if you want to follow me, pick up your cross and follow me.
Right.
It's a journey of suffering that you allow and you choose. And if you can look at marriage like that, this is the means of grace by which I change. Over the next 60 years, I'm going to take 30 years to accumulate trauma. I'm going to take 60 years to figure it out and unpack it and then pass on something healthy to my kids. Man, that's how heaven comes to earth.
That's so
it.
good.
That's it.
transform yourself, transform your interpersonal relationship, transform your family,
Yeah.
and you're bringing
And heaven comes to earth. That's
That is
it.
so good.
It's that simple.
So you guys do this. I know you said that you have, is it seminars? You do these gatherings?
Conferences.
Conferences,
Yeah.
okay.
Next one is in the spring, wedintowar.com. Wed Into War.
Wedintowar.com.
Got a book. It's on Audible. If you can't afford it, whatever, just hit us up.
It's Wed Into War, and it's on Audible. Is it available on Amazon or anything else? As a
Yeah,
paperback?
you can buy it pretty much everywhere books are sold.
Everywhere. We'll put a link. We'll put a link into this also.
Sweet.
But, yeah, this has been so good.
Thanks for having me.
I've learned so much.
It's been really fun.
So again, thank you guys so much for joining us. If you do a big favor, like this, subscribe, share, comment. That'll all help us reach as many as we can with messages like this. You know, this is such a message of hope, Tyson. It's such a message of hope. Because,
I love that. Wed Into War, message of hope.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a mess. It's hope because, you know, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to inspire everybody, not just men, but our niche is men, right?
Yeah.
And we're trying to inspire men to really be intentional and make the changes, right? Be courageous enough to take the steps that you need to take to make the next third of your life not just the best for yourself, but the best for your family and your community.
Yeah.
Right?
I love it.
Thanks for being here.
Yep.
Thank you all for coming.